Warning! Spoilers for Zoku Owarimonogatari and a number of other Monogatari games can be found in the video below. Caution is suggested when viewing. Greetings. I'm an enemy visor with a review for Zoku's Anxious Monogatari. Koyomi Araragi wakes up the following morning without the aid of his small sisters after losing the bet with Oki Oshino and graduating from high school. He is neither a high school student nor a college student at this point. They appear to be the antithesis of themselves, together with the other hierarchy and companions. In this chapter of Zoku Owarimonogatari, Koyomi Araragi awakens in a new, reversed world. What is it like? Well, like I just indicated in the synopsis, Zoku Owarimonogatari picks off where a warrior's monogatari left off. And overall, I found it to be entertaining. In order to avoid having my opinion slightly skewed, I should point out that I was able to see it over the course of 6 episodes, rather than in one continuous film. This allowed me to reflect on the events of each episode before moving on to the next. While you wouldn't get that break if you watched Zoku Owarimonogatari as a movie because everything is sort of dumped at you all at once. I haven't seen it as a movie though. There's a lot to unpack, and having that time in between episodes allowed me time to think about what was happening. I think I certainly prefer viewing it over 6 episodes. Yes. Thanks to Shaft and all the animators, viewers are once again presented to a visual delight regarding the anime's subject matter. Again, some excellent cinematography, and the animation is on pace with later Monogatari episodes. Very similar to A Concern and A Worry Season 2. I might be a little prejudiced, but I thought the shot of Ogi and Araragi talking, while it was being filmed from behind the clock, was extremely cool. However, they turn off camera because it is so brilliantly done, frightening, and almost bone-chilling. Even simply by looking at her, you can practically sense her rage or hatred, not just toward that Araragi, but also, based on what happened to Hana and Monogatari, perhaps toward herself. Having said that, I wouldn't necessarily rank the animation's quality on par with that of earlier seasons. The standard appearance is acceptable. However, if you've been watching one of God's 3, you'll be aware that occasionally the style may shift while the characters are speaking to one another. And none of it is necessarily terrible. There are several amusing ones with a retro video game vibe. However, none of them stood out when contrasted to the animation's styling, which was evident during the Worry season. Just because the LC in that arc is so attractive, I'd say that none of the animations in this place are particularly horrible. Oh, he appeared CG briefly in a scene, but it was annoying and apparent enough for me to wish that it wouldn't happen again. The light book series on which the adversary is based had strong sales, and the monetary enemy still enjoys respectable Blu-ray sales. I mostly appreciate the look of Zoku Owarimonogatari, but I do have some issues with some of the story and characters. Additionally, even after Zoku Owarimonogatari, there are still another 10 novels that are essentially potential enemies on it, still a bit up in the air, but still quite possible that we'll be getting more someday. I wouldn't say I despise what occurred. However, the plot seemed a little forced, and the majority of the characters seemed unnecessary or underused. In essence, the majority of them believed they were unnecessary. In an effort to identify the issue's root, I believe it begins with the plot, and then indirectly impacts the characters. If I were to contrast Koyomi Reversal with any other Monogatari tale arc, it would be in Zoku Owarimonogatari. I compare it somewhat to the Maijonshi arc, which is covered by Kabuki Monogatari in both Kabuki and Zoku Owarimonogatari. Oh, it's a Kabuki, for example, whose main selling point is to depict the development in the relationship between Auto Hot Key and Shinobu, as some interesting events occur. But by the end, things are more or less back to the beginning. You should know that technology improves time travel. Only Monogatari Soko Worry is pretty similar to the Shinobu time story arc, which I usually confuse it with. Outside Congress, Mother Toe is essentially setting up the events of Hana, Monogatari, and Oji is kind of sort of hinting at why she looks like a male in Hana. I'm not sure what this article is trying to say. And here is the point in the narrative where I start to have issues with most of the characters. Just keep in mind that this season of Monogatari was supposed to be the series' final one, which is why it is referred to as the final season. But it almost seems as though after finishing Warrior Monogatari, Monogatari series author Nishio Ishin recognized that Hana Monogatari was supposed to be the series' conclusion and that there were still a lot of unresolved issues about Kaoru, her mother, and Oji. The sequences with Congress, Mother, and Oji in Zoku Owarimonogatari make the reader feel the most pumped out and homeless, as if Nishio 2 created those scenes first, or at least knew that's where he intended the story to go. However, in doing so, It left the scenes involving the other characters only loosely connected. Simply put, they have the air of sideshow performers who are just there to say hello and have a little fun. 10. An Araragi is frequently present with the following character for reasons that, if they weren't, wouldn't significantly alter the plot. The majority of the characters outside of Suki seem to be there mostly as cameos simply because they are Monogatari characters. For instance, it's kind of intriguing that you constantly use adult form. When you think about it, the perverse Ona's son Aka elder sister persona, which is only really used in one scene, isn't all that different from Copper. A literal deus ex machina appears in the form of a black college to save Araragi. Why? Shinobu human formed his toes are argued to do what he was already trying to do, which was to get into the bath that Congress house so he can try and communicate with his world. Because he asked her to not have Ko-serpent form and Kid Hanakawa show up to only say that the story is coming to a close soon. I'll tell it one more. That is what he was already attempting. The majority of Zoku Owarimonogatari is devoted to Augie the otter attempting to figure things out. How to join Congress and help. The main reason why Augie couldn't figure out a way around herself the first time is that the story would be too short. She mostly simply feels like a hurdle. A scenario with a black type of Kawa that pandered to the audience was required, and Otter Augie could not speak to Congress mother too quickly. Speaking of the mother of the Congress, Kabru obviously inherited her good beauty and modest demeanor from her mother. Jokes aside, I was unhappy that we didn't get to see more of the struggle between the Rainy Devil and the Yacht Sunny, and speaking of Canberra again. It is bad enough to illustrate the resolution to the conflict in clunky narrative the next time we see her talking to Augie in the park. After we see any Devil Shady Otsuki Unlimited Rules shocking you at sushi. But keeping with the characters, she plays one of the more major roles. And I don't mind that we haven't seen much of her before this, and don't know as much about her as we do about the other characters. I'm not really sure how I feel about her outgoing personality, which reminds me of a friendly childhood acquaintance. Although it differs from the Sodacho we previously saw, I am not as invested in her as I am in the other characters. She's just not on the same level as the others in my opinion. Bacteria is specifically reserved for any possible Komucha members, which I have thus far included Numachai, and doing so would only damage his reputation. He understands that the greatness of Kaiki cannot be measured by simple ranking charts like this. Anyway, moving on to the final group of characters, I feel compelled to include Sen Yogahara, since I don't find her portrayal to be offensive. She has developed into a loving girlfriend who is primarily utilized as a means of argument to conclude the narrative. However, my main issue is that Otter Aggie never once mentioned her before this, or even attempted to see the other side of Yogahara if he told her. This is likely because he didn't feel the need to see the part of her that she keeps to herself. But I'm calling BS because he didn't fully understand everyone's situation before speaking with Oji. He figured he was first in some kind of reverse, backward universe, given the nature of Converse's original wish and what was shown in Bucket 1. A battery there, any devil won't harm Sen Yogahara over in Hana, which does occur later in time. Wouldn't he be a little concerned about the state of Sen Yogahara now, that she would be in danger from the Rainy Devil? He quickly realized that he probably wasn't. But the fact that the Rainy Devil had appeared. The fact is that when the Rainy Double Arm vanished, she became anxious for her Augie right away, because the arm's disappearance would have indicated that her desire had been granted. It makes conceivable that the Rainy Devil may conceivably continue executing the converse request if, on the other hand, the Rainy Devil's presence here doesn't imply that something happened to Sen Yogahara. After all, it was she who basically informed Bombay of any double-off. I'm done saying that. It doesn't seem very logical to me that our Augie would not have expressed any worry for Cinder Gohara. He didn't necessarily need to hurry off and find her during the course of the narrative. But she should have at least entered his head after seeing the Rainy Demon Filly as another character. An illustration of how it only parades its characters while making few other additions. And in this instance, making a certain feature of the story difficult to trust. Zoko's anxiety, in my opinion, is primarily present in Owarimonogatari to improve the narrative flow. It is tied together by 2 or 3 sequences, but the majority of the plot and the characters seem to be an afterthought. All we really needed to know was that the entire plot was being shoehorned in to fit those few moments inside a book and afterwards animated with Congress, Mother, and Oji. Additionally, it was enjoyable to see some of the same characters became sick. It wasn't really helpful, but everyone else just feels like they're showing up in a somewhat meaningless cameo role. Or you don't think it's necessary to make the other characters appear. I mean, maybe if you are going to wrap up the story, you want a final moment with everyone. But it doesn't, it leads into Hana. We had a decent setup for the characters in Hawaii. And obviously Kumbo gets a percent up in Hana. So half-fist doing it here and Zoku Owarimonogatari isn't a good look. As much as I have criticized Omori, I don't hate it, but I do believe it to be one of the series' weakest tales. A weak plot arc and motor battery are still far superior to the stories in many other anime, though. Despite this, there were no streaming options available to watch physical or emotional battery at the time of recording. You'll therefore need to find alternative viewing options, while Aniplex waits to distribute the Blu-rays in the US. If it does appear on a streaming service, such as Crunchyroll, Amazon, or another, I'll include it in the description below. In case you want a little additional information, I'll also include a link to my list of anime. And what do you think about the Zoho War and Money? Tell us in the comments section below. Hello, Ben Hostile Advisor as usual. Thanks for watching. Watch out for the rainy day with the left hook and goodbye.